Yeah, but just fucking feelings of shame over past mistakes, dealing with the lack of belief in free will, and how this makes me feel unmotivated to act and change my circumstance. I'm analyzing my own ethical framework. So like the thing about that is like, that's exactly what I mean by like, I don't think we have free will, but I don't think you should act in a way that in which we don't have free will, because like, it's like actually like kind of a huge leap in logic to be like, oh, okay, things are like, everything's due to like my biological nature, like my circumstances, all this sort of stuff. So that means I therefore have no ability to control my circumstances. Like to me, that's like, that like, the feeling of like, unless it is shaped by cognitive bias, I do not think that the notion of there being no free will does not like, free will does not mean like control, and control does not mean, and like not free will doesn't mean there's no control. But that's the thing, I'm really bad at not acting according to my beliefs. So like, so I understand that. That makes sense. I get what you're saying. So like, this might be like obvious, but I'm just like reflecting this at you. So like, but like, in a way, like, so there's two parts of you. There's the part of you that's like, that has like, there's like the conscious part of you that like thinks about the thing, and then like there's your internal subconscious beliefs. And like what I've always said is that like every belief is logical, like every and that goes for even subconscious beliefs, which means that like it's not like the problem isn't like, it kind of is, but it's not like, when you like get really semantic and annoying about it, like the real thing is that like there's something that like you consciously want to do, but because of what your unconscious or subconscious wants, your body is acting in a different way, because like you have like beliefs that are not part of like your will. Like your will and your, but like, it doesn't mean that your body or like the way you act is incompetent. It's just that there's a conflict between the way you consciously want to act and the internalized logic that your body has learned to move in. So like, you know, like think about this in like the context of like social anxiety or something. So like, I can have the conscious belief that like, okay, I know that I should go talk to people, but like and the reason I don't talk to people isn't because I'm like inherently stupid or something. The reason I don't talk to people is because my body has learned to like restrain my actions in order to keep me safe. And so in that, but like the anxious person will just say like, I'm too stupid to just get over it. Like I should just get over it and just act. But like like control comes with understanding. And so the first thing to understand is that like none of your actions are ever without a logic to them. So like, if you think that you're simply acting out of like, if you're simply not acting or acting in a specific way because of stupidity or because of incompetence or because of lack of willpower, all this sort of thing, I think that that comes from like a lack of internal understanding, because I think that everything in our brain is like inherently a feature and not like of an error. Like it's like everything has a purpose, but we tend to invalidate those things when those when what we consciously want to do contradicts with what we've learned subconsciously to abide with for survival reasons. I hope that makes any sense. And like, if like, and you might have, you probably and might have already known it. But like, I think that like, despite whether or not people know things like that, I think it's important to acknowledge when we kind of get into thought loops about like, oh yeah, I just can't like I can't act the way that I want. And it's like, okay, well, like, it depends on what you mean by what I want. Like, because there's a part of you that consciously wants to act for this reason. But like, there's another part of that you're kind of neglecting, where it's like, okay, when did your body learn to like not listen to that part of your brain? Because like, you know, like I can want to I can want to not be anxious all I want, but if my body learns that there are danger signals everywhere, it doesn't care about my happiness. It wants me to be safe. So it's going to like prevent me from taking actions that will put me in danger. So yeah, like it and so like you're not good at acting not in accordance with your beliefs and stuff like that. So like there's a part of you in that case that's like I want to like there's a part of you that then acknowledges like, okay, I don't want to act in accordance to my beliefs and stuff like that. But like when you think about that, like how does that even work? Like that does then how is it your belief at that point? So you have to just acknowledge that like there's different levels of your psyche that when they come into conflict with one another, it creates cognitive dissonance. And so whenever there's a discrepancy between like what you consciously want and what you subconsciously are forced to do, then like your brain tries to make sense of it. And this typically manifests in like a big way that this manifests is like just saying like, oh, I'm just incompetent or I'm just stupid and stuff like that. I'm not saying that's what you're saying. I'm saying that like when different parts of our brain are in conflict, like we need to come up with an explanation. We're very intolerant of like two parts of our brain just contradicting and like not having to give in to one or the other. Like we typically think that like we have to make a choice. Like we have to be like fully in line with our beliefs. We have to be fully not in line with our beliefs, like make a choice about the way you plan to live life. But that all starts with just acknowledging that like there's a part of you that wants to do something and there's another part of you that's not happy with the fact that you want to do that thing. Yeah, like there like, but that's the thing is that like free will does not mean that you don't have agency. Like think about it, like someone who has chosen to go down a certain path in life, it's not like what is the idea of like, okay, you don't have free will? What does that mean for that person? Like it meant that like their computer, the data in their mind computer got the certain data that was required in order to make a change in their life. And like this is my problem with like the argument of like we don't have free will, because like I hate even saying it because like it leads to people being like, oh, okay, so that means I have no agency. It's like, no, it just means that everything's karmic. So like if you get agency in your life, it's because there is a cause and effect relationship with the way you perceive things and your ability to actually change them. It doesn't mean that like the notion that you will not be able to change your circumstances because you don't have free will assumes that your destiny was to not change your thing. Whereas like whether or not I have free will is completely like irrelevant when you think about like the path I want to take in life. Because like regardless of it, the path I want to take in life is still this path. It's just that like what's the explanation for how I came to that conclusion? It's that before I didn't have the data in my head that, oh, I actually can control my destiny. So like paradoxically, the data of, oh, we don't have free will creates more of an external locus of control, and having the belief that we quote unquote have free will creates an internal locus of control. And so weirdly, like it's super complicated, but that's why I'm like, if you like, I literally don't believe in like free will in the sense that like I think that you can explain why like someone without specific data of the mind will not be able to come to certain conclusions because they don't have the neurological input in order to come to those conclusions. But it doesn't mean that like I don't believe it in the sense that like there is like a karmic destiny of the universe to be like you have no control over what you do in life. I don't believe that at all, actually. Like I think that all free will means is that like your mind isn't just a computer that calculates what the best next option is. But if you get the data that's hopeful and tells you like you have power, then you will act in a way that assumes that you have power, and therefore you'll move in like a good direction in life, because typically people who have an internal locus of control move in a more positive direction in life. So that's what I mean by that. So that's why I always like, it's really weird. But do you believe that people could have acted different, or only the way we could have acted? So like, I think that like, I think people's actions are, so like, this is such a weird thing to say. So like, I hope that you're okay with like this sounding really weird and vague, but I hope you know that I'm not trying to skip out on it. Like, genuinely, like, if you can follow this is my opinion. So people's actions are predetermined in the sense that we can only act with the data that we have, and therefore like we have technology to show like, okay, with the information this person has, they were always going to pick this option. But like the thing is that like this does not mean that like, but do you get how like if I determine, oh, free will doesn't exist, that means I have no power in my life. Like, that thought is going to breed the result of actually having no control. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So like, you were always going to act that way from like a neurological standpoint, because we can literally predict the decision-making behavior. But if your interpretation of no free will means I can't control anything because things are predestined, then like, do you get that? Like, predestined and stuck are not the same thing. Because if you think that because you're tangling those things up when you think, oh, I don't have free will, that means I don't have control. Because like, think about it. If things are predestined based on what goes into our mind, then what is the basic mechanism in which we can change our life? It's controlling what goes into our mind. I'm just saying that like right now, if I I'm not assuming that I'm going to change your mind about anything or influence you. But like, for instance, if I told you like, actually there's like a study where free will doesn't exist. If I didn't tell you that, then you'd go on living life in a specific way. But because I gave you new data, you're going to behave in a different way. That's all I mean by free will. Like, free will does not imply that like, oh, I'm gonna be like a lazy piece of shit today, and it's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's not like an excuse to shirk responsibility. I'm not calling you this. I'm saying that like people who like internalize free will as an excuse for nihilism and saying like, all I'm saying is that your mind will act in a way that is congruent with the data that it has. But like, if the data that you have is that you can't control your life, it's because your mind came to that conclusion for a reason. So like, if you're the fundamental thing to understand is that like there is a huge ocean of difference between I have free will and I have free will, therefore I can control, and there's a huge ocean of difference between I have no free will, therefore I cannot control. Because do you get that? It's like imagine like the outcome of me winning this game or not is dependent. Like, think about this. So I'm playing Haste right now. I'm about to go against this boss. I do not know whether or not my brain has the circuitry and pattern recognition that is necessary to beat this boss. But so like I'm acting from a standpoint that's like I don't have free will. So like so someone who internalizes this in a negative way would say, I don't believe that they would say, I don't have free will, therefore I am destined to lose. Like, I am destined to lose. But when you think about that, that is an ocean of because like, all I said is that it's predetermined. The perception that that means that you're gonna lose, the entire assumption that you're gonna lose, period, came from you. It doesn't come from the notion of free will. That's why people get nihilistic when it comes to this stuff, because they have an assumption that they are going to fail in life, and therefore the notion that they don't have free will then reinforces the idea that they're gonna lose in life. But the problem is not whether or not you have free will or not. The problem is whether or not you have free will. The problem is that the reason that is bad is because your mind has colored the perception of what that means. Your mind has determined because, oh, well, I'm going to lose, and I'm going to lose at life. I'm going to lose at this video game, whatever. And so therefore, this has now become a certainty because of free will. But that all comes from the assumption that you were going to lose in the first place. I don't know whether I'm going to win this game or not. I literally don't know. You can't see the future. You can't see what you can control and what you can't control. But the mind will convince you that it knows what's coming because it's a safety mechanism. But like, truthfully, I can't predict the future. I don't know if I'm going to beat this thing. But I'm not just going to be like, but I do not have the preconceived assumption that I am not good enough to beat this game. Because if I don't think I'm good at this game and I think it's predetermined, then the obvious conclusion is that it is predetermined that I'm bad at the game and that I won't win. But if I go in with a neutral assumption, I don't know how good I am. I don't know how good I am at this game. I don't know whether or not I'm going to win. Then whether or not it's predetermined is completely irrelevant. Because things are just going to happen the way that they were destined to happen. But I don't know what that is. Do you get that? Like, things being predetermined is only scary if you have the assumption that it will be that it was destined to be inherently negative. But if you're looking at it from a completely neutral perspective, like things could turn out good, things could turn out bad, then the idea that things are predetermined shouldn't affect what you do. Because now someone who this is what I mean. So like in the context of playing this video game, a person who has low self-esteem and has no, a person who has low self-esteem and believes that there's no free will believe, oh, I shouldn't even try playing this video game because I know that I'm not good enough to play it and I have no control over my destiny of how I get better at this game. Like, whereas because I acknowledge that I cannot see the future, I literally am just like, hey, you know what would be the best strategy moving forward? For me to play the game, get experience, and then use that, because then my odds will probably be better next time I play it. But this is why people get stuck. When people are convinced that they're going to lose, they don't play the game at all. And that's why I don't like the notion of people saying free will doesn't exist, therefore I shouldn't act. That's completely a huge leap in logic that uses your own cognitive bias that you inherently weren't good enough to begin with. So like, if you don't have low self-esteem, whether or not things are predetermined literally is completely irrelevant, because it doesn't change the way that you act. Because people who don't have low self-esteem assume that understand that like we cannot see the future. We don't understand what's going to happen. But like people who think about people who have like incredibly low self-esteem, they like yeah, that's what I mean. But like that's like what you need to do. Like that's the first step to unraveling this. So understand that like your perception of the situation and the reality are two separate things. Don't use this to invalidate your emotions and be like, oh, see emotions, you're stupid. Just simply acknowledge like, oh, like if I'm you and I'm playing this game right now and I have the thought I'm destined to lose this game and I have no control over it. I'm just inherently stupid. Like, and it's just, I'm never going to be good enough to do this thing. What I would then do is then say like, okay, the reality is that I actually have no idea what the future holds. Like, for all I know, I could win and I could lose. Like, both options are on the table. The reason that I feel like I'm going to lose is because my mind is attaching the idea that I will lose. Like, the reason my mind is telling me that this action is pointless is because I have low self-esteem. That's the only reason I even bring free will into the argument. Because it is used, because like, what does that do for your brain? Because we think of this as like a purely negative thing. Like, oh, well, low self-esteem is bad. But think about what low self-esteem has helped you do. I don't know you personally, but like low self-esteem is a defense mechanism, which means that obviously it screws up our lives in many ways, but it actually helps us in many ways too. So like if I go up to people at school and I get bullied and that really hurts me to get bullied, why is it adaptive for me to understand that I am inherently a low value human being that doesn't deserve companionship? It's because it prevents me from opening myself up to the hurt. And in that same way, understand that the brain is not coming to this conclusion because it's trying to screw you up in life. Like, it's actually has a benevolent purpose. It simply does not want you to deal with the loss of hope again. And so like, it's a very overly simplistic way of going about it, but like you need to like confront the paradoxically, what I'm going to tell you to do is not like look for hope. I'm not even going to tell you to like look for like, think about how great it would be to achieve this thing. Think about it, because then that grounds your mind in expectation. And then we have the opposite problem where you have too many expectations and stuff. What instead I ask you to do is simply start out by separating your low self-esteem from the reality of the situation. And you do that by understanding that low self-esteem actually has an inherent purpose. Like, low self-esteem is not just a bully that comes into your mind to hurt you unnecessarily. Low self-esteem is actually there to prevent you from ever putting yourself out there and getting hurt again. So like, your mind is unwilling to take the chance that you were wrong about being able to do something. And it's easier to just not do it at all. That's why the idea of having no free will is paradoxically cozy. Like, because when we feel hopeless in life, we think that our life will feel better if we get hopeful. Wrong. That is incorrect. Because once again, our brain is not here to hurt us. It's meant to help us. And what is it protecting us from? It's preventing us from losing that hope. It understands that hope feels good, but it has made a calculation in its own circuitry and determined that, okay, we have hope, and like, hope feels good, but it is not worth the risk of losing the hope. So it's actually, so you might resent your brain for not giving you hope, but it's literally doing it because I can guarantee you at some point in your life, you had hope, lost it, and it was so crushing that your brain decided for you, oh yeah, we're never letting that happen again. I'll be damned if I ever lose hope like that again, because that killed me. Like, that was terrible. We are avoiding this sort of situation at all costs. And so like, it's sucky, but like, the thing that I like recommend is simply that like you learn to not do things for reasons. And this is really weird. but like I've talked about this in past streams, like learn to do things independent of the reason. You're not going to do it because you enjoy it. You're not going to do it because you feel productive doing it. You're going to simply do it for the sake of doing it. Like a good example of this is like do something inconvenient for literally no reason. And that's going to feel impossible to do when you what am I talking about? So like that's gonna feel impossible to do, especially because your brain's gonna say like, well, no, it would be more productive to do this. No, it'd be more productive to do this thing. Like, but like think about it. Do you end up doing those things anyways? Probably not, because like your mind has convinced you that like there's no purpose in doing anything other than like what our base instinct is. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of hope. It's a waste of all these things. And so like that's the only reason it keeps us trapped, is because we're in this mode where like I need a good reason to do something. But like once you learn to just act for the sake of action and remove expectation, then you will be free from the fear that you're gonna lose hope. And therefore and then once we fully come back to the beginning and once we've reverse engineered this, then the low self-esteem doesn't have power over what you do, because the entire power that low self-esteem has over you is telling you, hey, I know you think you have a good reason to do this thing, but here's why the reason for doing that is bad. It's because you're inherently low. It's because you're inherently low value. It's going to give you all these reasons. So imagine how powerful, and like why can't you fight back against your brain? Because it gave you a really good reason for why you shouldn't do it, and you couldn't argue back with a better reason to do it. And so it has won the argument, so you lose. You do nothing. That's the choice. But think about how you counteract that. Think about every time you've tried to argue with your low self-esteem and tell it like, actually, no, I'm cool. Actually, no, I'm great. I actually have so much potential. I could achieve all this stuff. You never win. Low self-esteem always wins because it goats you into an argument and then you lose because it's already made a determination about you and it's got all this evidence, quote unquote, which by the way is simply a construction your brain makes of past events. It's a rationalization. It's not reality. Like, it's based on facts, but it doesn't mean that it's true. That's like a huge thing to understand, is that like just because something's based in fact, it doesn't mean that it's true, because your brain will do this thing where it picks facts and it assumes correlation. The best example I like to use for this is like, did you know that everyone who's ever owned a bunny ends up dying by the age of 100? That means that bunnies make you die by the age of 100. That means if you didn't own a bunny, you would have lived. Like, that's like what your brain does with facts. It literally is like, oh, did you know that you got rejected this one time? Oh, cool. Did you know that that means that no one will ever love you? Like, and we just accept that. We literally just like accept that. And we're like, oh, you're right, brain. Duh. And then like your brain will convince you that you're logical, that you're a logical human being. And what a joke that is. Like, that's like, your brain always has a logic to it. But like I said at the beginning, just because like you're efficient doesn't, like, the most efficient people in the world are the most inefficient because they're perfectionists and they don't end up doing anything unless it's perfect. The most efficient people on the planet are the least efficient people on the planet end up being the most efficient because they're comfortable with action. They just know how to act because they don't have expectation. Life's a joke in the sense that it's kind of funny sometimes how that works. Like, I think that life becomes beautiful when you stop shackling yourself to reasons. I'm glad you're going to try it because like and it seems illogical. Every circuit in your body is going to lash out at you for having such a stupid, ignorant thought process. Why would we do something for no reason? It's going to waste energy. It's going to be pointless. We're wasting time. Think about how intolerant your brain is of wasting time when you have low self-esteem. It's like, no, don't do that. We can't do that. It's a waste of time. No. And listen to all those parts of your body. And then do something simple. Just say like, okay, yup, it's going to be a waste of time. I agree. We're going to do it anyways. And it's going to be like, no, but you know what? I'm going to make you feel bad about yourself. I'm going to make you feel uncomfortable. I'm going to make you feel, it's like, okay, you can make me feel those things. That's okay. You make me feel like that anyways. So like, what's the difference and stuff? And it's just like, and then your brain's like, no, I'm sorry. Like, I just do it because like, and it, like, once you catch your brain like that, it's actually kind of beautiful how much it squirms, because like when you feel self-deprecating and then you tell your brain like, hey, do this thing. It's like, no, in fact, I'm going to bully you into not doing it. And then you could just be like, you bully me anyways. Why would I listen to you if you're going to bully me anyways? And then it's just like, well, it's like, just like, so just like, you know, like, do it independent of that. Don't argue with the brain. Don't tell yourself, oh, this is why I'm actually like an amazing person and I'm incredible. Don't do this like, don't like be trying to convince yourself of something you know isn't true. And also don't invalidate the argument and say like, actually, no, brain, this is why you're wrong. This is why you're wrong. This is why, because then you're arguing with it and you're kind of admitting to it that it has power over you and what you do. Simply acknowledge that your emotions exist. They are there. It's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel painful, and just surrender to it. Accept it. And what I mean by that is not surrender and accept the emotion. Like, I don't mean like internalize the fact that you're stupid. Like, what I instead mean by surrender is just understand like, yeah, if I'm going to move forward in life, my brain's going to really hate this, but like, I'm not gonna seek out this hypothetical fantasy where I can move forward in life and I can feel comfortable doing it. I just have to acknowledge that if I'm gonna move forward in life, that my brain's gonna hate me for it. And then you can just be like, and then, so like, yeah, like you're, and then once you've accepted that, once you're not running away from the pain, once you're not trying to optimize the progress part of your life, and once you stop waiting around for this magical day where you can make progress in life and your trauma isn't gonna flare up and tell you that it's a waste of time and a waste of energy and give you all these reasons you shouldn't do it. Once you just accept that like, yeah, I'm gonna do this and my brain's gonna lash out at me as I do it, but you know what? It's gonna do that anyways. I might as well do it. Like, it's gonna give me all these reasons. And when it gives me the reasons, I'm still just going to do the thing, because I acknowledge that this is the path I want to take in life. I want to move in this direction. Then you become ungovernable. Like, this is how you gain control over your life despite free will. Because why did you not have power to do this stuff before? It's because, like, you know, like, if this does end up helping you, it's because you didn't know this information before. But this is what I mean by free will, is that, like, until we have information that helps us confront our demons, we are powerless to help the demons. I mean, we are powerless to defeat the demons in our mind. But once we actually do have the necessary information, that's why I say don't give in to this idea that, like, free will is like, oh, if I have free will, then I have control over my life. If I don't have free will, then I don't have control over life. All I mean is that the data you have determines what you do. And therefore, it's sad for people who don't have mental health advice, because what do people who don't know how their mind works do? They fall into the same traps over and over. But this is why I stream. Hopefully, when I input information like this into your mind computer, it will then have the data to move forward in a productive manner. Now, hopefully, the machine will be well oiled and it'll start to move. That's all I mean by free will. It does not, free will in itself does not inherently determine any sort of value of destiny. It does, nowhere in the definition of free will does it say life is destined to be bad or life is destined to be good. All it says is that, like, things are predestined. You just don't know what they are yet. And so now that, like, you've gotten more data, try it out and see how it works for you. And hopefully it works out good. And then, you know, I'll still be streaming. So, like, you know, come back to me with what happened. And then we can maybe talk even further about it. Like, that's all I mean. Like, I think that, like, all this stuff is so important to, I think all this stuff is so important to know, because like if you live life in a certain machination, you will be powerless to what you need to get out of life. So like an example of this is like, if I live life based on how much dopamine I'm gonna get, then of course I'm gonna scroll on my phone all day. It's the most dopaminergic activity you could possibly do. And then people are like, oh, well, what's the purpose of your life? It's to get as much dopamine as possible. So what do you do all day? I go on my phone. Oh, but I don't know why. I don't know why. Your life is congruent with the way that your brain actually has logically determined if we want to go through with life. So once you determine that you are going to live a life of futility, you are going to go about life in a way that is independent of reasons. You are going to live an illogical, energy-wasting life, but a better way to frame that is I am simply going to live a life of action. Meaning regardless of what the outcome is, because I acknowledge I cannot control the outcome, I am going to act. Because I'm done not acting. Then like everything in your life, you don't need reasons. You don't need motivation. You don't need the stars to align in order for you to behave a specific way. You simply just do. And so that all starts with changing your framework of mind to be like, okay, what's the type of life I want to live? Let me read this. That's actually what Spinoza said. Freedom doesn't rely on metaphysical free will, but in knowing why you're acting the way you're acting. Spinoza was a Dutch philosopher. Yeah, that's really cool. I agree. Like, I'm literally like, you're like, oh, and that's like actually very like philosophical. That's very spiritual in nature, because like, you know, like that, like, and that's actually very neuroscientific, because what we know about like, what we know about the concept of willpower, quote unquote, is that it essentially doesn't exist. Like, everyone's looking for this magical thing called willpower. It doesn't exist. The only thing that willpower is, it's the circuit of your brain that acknowledges that there's a conflict. So there is no overpowering anything. There is simply acknowledging the like conflict in your mind and how much it's like, it's difficult. Like, that's literally it. And so in that, so like what this means is that not that we don't have power over what we do, but that the way to willpower is simply awareness. The way to willpower is not action or conscious thought. The way to getting willpower is simply to understand the reasons that your mind works. And a huge way that we can get to that conclusion is understanding that our mind, no matter how much you hate your mind for doing certain things, no matter how much it's beating you up, no matter all these different things, your mind always has a reason to do something that is positive. Because remember, just because it's making you unhappy doesn't mean it's illogical. Just because it's incorrect doesn't mean it's illogical. Your mind is behaving in a way that will optimize your survival. And that doesn't mean that it's bad. It's just that's the way it was programmed. It wasn't meant to make you happy. It was meant to help you survive. And so once you understand the machinations in which your mind works, you can then say, okay, so the reason that it's scary to ignore this is because my mind is telling me, no, you're working against our survival instincts, so you're gonna die. And that's why it literally feels like you're gonna die when you move against your anxiety. But once you understand that, then you have all of the data to make good decisions. Because before that, you're just operating on the spectrum of like, oh, well, I think I'm stupid. A thought crossed my mind. Should I think to myself, no matter how I feel, I'm still going to act in accordance with my goals or values? Or is there something to like, so there's like, so that's a very slippery slope, but I'm going to explain why I kind of think the answer is yes. This is the important thing, because like, I don't think this is your fault when I say irresponsible, but like, you see when I just talked about like free will, how certain ideas are dangerous because our mind can paint them in certain ways. So like, that's why I always say the idea of believing we have no free will is dangerous, because people with low self-esteem will paint the actual meaning of that to mean something different. So like, people with low self-esteem will see the data that we have no free will and make a determination that, oh, that means this. But what they mean, what they interpret it as actually different than the reality, because it is based on an assumption that is due to a cognitive bias. And in that same way, I'm going to tell you this and say, with a huge caveat, watch out for how your brain colors this situation. One sec. Can you give me a root beer? I'm like thirsty, but I don't want to go get one. Thank you. Like there, so like, so I live my life generally by like a statement from Mr. Miyagi, like from Karate Kid, like, and I love this. I love this quote so much because, but if you interpret this wrong, it's going to lead to more stunting of your emotional growth. So very much I'm going to tell you what to watch out for too. So my belief is never put passion over principle, even if you win, you lose. And I think that is such a wise quote, because think about every time in your life you have put sheer passion and emotion over your principles. It feels like even if you won, like for instance, like I really should do this nice thing for someone, but instead I'm going to do something selfish. Why does it feel inherently bad to do that? Because our brain understands that that was like kind of a shitty thing to do. Now, where there's some nuance with this is I do not want you to then think to yourself, oh, okay, so every time I have an emotion, because I'm not going to move in accordance with it, I'm going to instead that means that, because if you're not going to listen to your emotions, your mind can easily fall into the trap of like, oh, so there's no point in listening to them. My emotions are dumb, they're stupid and stuff. But like, that's the thing, is that emotions are information. Emotions are still important. Why is anything bad for you? It's bad if you're dependent on it. You should not be dependent on your emotions for what you do. What you do should not be determined by how insecure you're feeling or how much motivation you have, all these abstract things like reasons and everything like that, because then you're not in control. Your emotions are in control. So in that case, why should I just live an entirely principled life? Why should I ever listen to emotions if I'm not going to obey them? Well, think about this in any other context. Why should you ever learn anything? Why should you ever take in new information if everything you hear, like, think about it this way. Why would I ever have a conversation with someone if I'm not going to go about it in this attitude of thinking that everyone ever is right about anything? Like anything anyone said, because that's what you do with your emotions when you give into them too much. That's the attitude you take. Like when you give into your shame and say, yeah, that's right, it's because you go into your mind with the assumption that your emotions are always correct. But what's the problem with doing the exact opposite of that and saying, no, my emotions are always incorrect? Now, this emotional circuitry in your brain that is literally designed to send you signals and information, you are no longer taking in that information. And what does that do? It makes you directionless. You have no idea what you're going to do with your life because you don't know what you like. You don't know what you dislike. You don't know any of this stuff. It prevents you from actually taking any pleasure in life. And like, also, your emotions are always going to be kind of controlling what you do. They're a fundamental part. Like, logic and emotions are intertwined. They're not separatable. Like, your emotions will always influence your logic, regardless of how much you can sense your emotions. And so, like, what you should do instead is, I use this metaphor all the time. So, like, you're a king or a queen, or like or you know, like whatever gender you are, like they're but like you're a ruler of a kingdom. This kingdom is called your mind. You stay in your palace all day, so you don't know anything that's going on in the outside world. Your mind will get information in the and we'll think of this as like informants, like people who come and give us information that inform how we should fulfill our kingly duties. Like there will be a guy coming in and saying like Your Highness, there is this thing going on in this country. Should we Yeah, exactly. 100%. That has no nuance to it. You know, you want to know how to know if you're being controlled by your emotions, whether or not there's nuance. If your brain is telling you this fact is objectively correct and it's 100% that way, then because that's what cortisol, the stress hormone, does to us, is it removes all sense of nuance. So the more nuance you're feeling, and the more you can kind of see multiple sides of situations, that shows that you're not stressed. So that's a very easy way. That's how I know when I should like speak my mind on certain things, is when like I can sense that I'm being very black and white about it. I like hold myself back. But like back to the metaphor. So like your informants are going to come into your castle and say like, hey, we're feeling sad. We're feeling anxious. Therefore, king, we should not do this. We should leave. We should leave the party. And then like, you know, your logic's going to come, and then you'll be like, you're right. That's correct. I agree. Ah! And then you panic and you just give into that. And then the next one is like, it's like, oh my goodness, Your Highness, you're stupid because you didn't go to the party. And then it's just like, you're right. And then how good is a ruler who listens to every informant and just obeys them? Why is there even a king in the first place? There's no point of having a king because then just the informant should be in charge. The king has no if the king has no control over what they do and they just listen to the informants the entire time and obey everything that they do, there's a huge difference between listening and obeying. Obeying is you have no agency over what you take into your brain and what you agree with. You just blindly are like, yup, I agree. Yup, I agree. Yup, I agree. And like, but like also if that ruler does not, but also if that ruler, like says no informants, I'm done obeying informants, I'm done with you, leave, I will be a ruler the way I want to be a ruler, then they're not gonna have any information. So like what you should do, one sec, I'll finish the metaphor and then I'll answer your question. So what you should do is you should think of your mind as like you are the ruler of a kingdom. Now your emotions and your logic and all these different parts of you are going to come bearing news. They're going to come with their little scrolls and give you information. You are not a good ruler if you obey everything that the informants tell you and believe them and take them at their word for everything. You are also not a good ruler if you ignore all your informants and refuse to be educated because you're because you don't have the willpower to be in control of what policies you enact. A truly good ruler allows informants to speak, and then they can make their own judgments on the validity of it. But things like social anxiety and like intense stressful emotions take away your nuance, which moves you towards the obeying king. It moves you towards the passive king. And things like anhedonia, things like alexithymia, which is like emotional color blindness, which is a result of you pushing down your emotions, that will move you towards the ignorant king who like refuses to listen to anyone. Like what you instead want to be is this nuanced middle ground where you see the information and it does not control you. You can choose to obey the information. You can choose to not obey the information, but through that, you need to be comfortable with making your own decisions. So that's what I'm going to say about that. So don't just shun your emotions because they're wrong and you want to live a principled life. And also don't just listen to your emotions all the time, because your emotions are not fact. They are information. But much like all information, it varies in credibility. But always think of the, okay, why would my informant be saying that I'm stupid? Why is it beneficial for me to think that I'm stupid? Oh, probably because it protects me from hurt. Okay, do I want to be protected from the hurt, or do I want to move in this direction as life? It's that like simple of a methodology. One question: should I make a universal mind that everything has nuance? So I think you should. That's a really good question. I think rather than having set, I think, see, that's the thing, is that I paradoxically think the statement everything has nuance does not have nuance. So like, you know, like political centrists, like people who refuse to be on like identify as right or left, they will often consider themselves more open-minded and nuanced because they refuse to be on the side. But like whether or not that's actually true is defined by how okay they are with identifying with one side or the other. So like if it's driven by the fact that you would hate to be called a leftist or a right winger and stuff like that, then like that's actually not nuanced at all. You're actually not doing it because you're nuanced. You're actually doing it because you are very one-dimensionally minded about if I'm a centrist, that means I'm nuanced, which isn't nuanced. Like, do you get that? And so in that same way, if I go about life thinking that nothing is black and white, nothing is simple, then also that could potentially be limiting. I struggle to think of anything that doesn't have nuance, but I think that you should try and avoid blanket statements like that. Like, I know that like in times like this in your life when you have low self-esteem, it can be very tempting to like want like a North Star, like a way to like guide through your life, which is why I'm trying to give you these more like nuanced metaphors and stuff like that. But I would try and stay away from like from like very dogmatic statements that are just kind of like everything of this kind is this. Every time this happens, it means this. Like I would generally always approach, like, this is the one thing that I think you should do. Approach everything with the assumption that there could be nuance. Doesn't mean there is nuance. Just, I think everything in your life will generally become better if you approach everything with the assumption that there is probably a nuance to it. But I think that even, like, the idea that everything inherently has nuance is, like, might be a little bit too hyperbolic and a little bit too weirdly not nuanced. And so yeah, like notice when your mind isn't being nuanced. Notice when your mind is saying these like sweeping statements that are like I am this, I am that, like the ego statements and everything. This is also what the ego does. It's very one-dimensional. It's very like you are either high value or very low value because it's a defense mechanism. It's either meant to knock us down or build us up. So like there, in that same way, the ego is formed by stress, and stress takes away our nuance, which is why the ego never has nuanced opinions of us. Everything can have nuance, but it's not always going to be the case. God. Yeah, like I would just go into everything with a curious mind. Assume you could be wrong about everything you believe, but also understand that just because you could be wrong doesn't mean you are. Like, approach everything in life with curiosity and the understanding that I would say kind of phrase it in like the vice versa way that means the same thing. I would go about life in the kind of way that's like, when my mind is being one-dimensional, I would treat that with skepticism. So like, rather than say, I think it's dangerous to say when my mind is being nuanced, I'm being objective. I think it's a lot safer to say when my mind is being black and white, I'm going to treat this with a level of skepticism and be like, okay, maybe my brain's kind of like freaking out right now. I've been stressed for years due to trauma. That absolutely. So like trauma is like a huge thing that does, because what trauma does is, So what trauma does is it rewires our brain to behave in a very unnuanced way because our cortisol levels are our stress hormones are very high, which invokes black and white thinking and removes nuance. Additionally, what it does is it creates embedded defense mechanisms that not only rationalize the world in a very black and white way in order to survive, because think about this, like, in the wild, when there's predators, if we know that we don't understand the environment, it's adaptive for us to need to understand the environment because then our brain's just saying, hey, learn more about the environment, because then if we don't learn about the environment more, then we're going to be susceptible to predators. In that same way, when you're traumatized, your brain will need to think that it understands what the world is like. Because when you're hurt, your brain's like, we can't get hurt again. We need to learn how to not get hurt again. And how is it going to do that? It's going to form a dogmatic sense of how the world operates that when you dive deep into it will conveniently protect you from a lot of hurt. Like, when you start tearing down the walls of your trauma actually like flares up for a bit and gets angry at you and tries to tell you. And that's kind of how you can tell that it's trauma, is when you approach your trauma with nuance, it will flare up and get worse. And that doesn't mean that trauma's unbeatable. Trauma's absolutely beatable, but initially, your trauma's so used to being in the driver's seat, so when you try and approach it with some skepticism, it's going to lash out at you. And that is absolutely adaptive, because imagine if we were like getting stalked by predators and like we were like, oh, well, being scared feels bad, so I don't want to be scared anymore. Then we die if we could just wish away those things. So of course there's a mechanism of our brain where our trauma flares up. But the important thing is that, like, you learned, I use that word, like, you learned key life lessons that protected you from hurt back then. And now what's so frustrating about your life now is that there is a separate cognitive part of you that wants to move in a specific direction. But for your survival, the trauma has taught you that it doesn't give a shit what your brain wants to do. It knows what you need to do to survive. And it's like, and your existence is proof of that, because it's like, see? You had trauma, but you made through it. Guess why? It's because I made you have low self-esteem, so you took less risks, you put yourself less out there, you kind of stayed in your shell, you didn't do this stuff, you formed this dogmatic view about the world, which explains everything and makes everything have a comfy, cozy explanation to it. That's because of me. The trauma takes all the credit for what you did. And the sad thing is that it's kind of right. Like, trauma is adaptive. It's like, trauma is anything that affects the way that we handle life beyond what our cognition is. So you learned very key life lessons, so your brain and body are going to react in very automatic ways because it's so habitually acclimated to behaving in those ways. And where all of this stress and self-deprecation comes from is when you try to move in a direction in life. And then, like I just said, when you move against trauma, it's the thing that flares up. It's like I literally just used this metaphor today. It's like Peter Parker tearing off the symbiote. And then what does the symbiote do? Is it just like, cool, man, I guess I'll leave? No, it like screams and it howls and it hisses and it tries to attach itself back. That's how trauma feels when you move in a direction that is not correlative with the direction it wants you to move in. So that's like a really easy way to identify when you have trauma. Is that, like, when I try and move in a direction that it doesn't like, what does it say in response? And if it gets louder as you move away from it, that's a good sign that it's probably trauma. And so the challenge in your life is like, okay, when I want to move in this direction, I have this emotional response. But what has your trauma taught you to do? It has not taught you to ignore your emotions. It has taught you that when you give in to your emotions, you survive, which is why your brain ultimately gives into the trauma all the time. Because it's like, well, it knows best. It made me come this far. It actually made me survive, and I'd rather be alive than unhappy. Like I don't like. I mean, yeah. Like I'd rather be alive than dead. Like, so once you learn that, it's so hard to move in the other direction, because not only have you been taught to have these black and white views, additionally, you have been taught, what am I trying to say? Like, you have been taught to comply instinctually with said black and white views. Like, you're not in control of what you think. You're literally like, it's not the problem that you have low self-esteem. It's the problem that your trauma has physiologically, like, you're gonna feel it in your body when you move away from your trauma. Like, there is a part of your body that is like, we're gonna die if we don't give in to this trauma. If we don't give in to these self-perceptions and the way we view the world, we're gonna die. Like, and that's so scary. Like, that's terrifying. Like, and so like, your problem is twofold. You have black and white views about the world, and your entire, like, your entire body is moving against you when it comes to this. Like, your entire body is like, oh, I just realized I'm streaming this. Like, your entire body is going to hate you for moving against your trauma. And so you need to, and so that's why I say move away from reasons. Move away from accepting that all your emotions are dogmatic. Gain tolerance for negative emotion, but don't lose sight of your emotions. Keep your eyes on the emotions, but don't let them control you. Because people tend to fall into one category. They either look at their emotions and they're controlled by them, or they blindfold themselves and then they're not influenced by their emotions, but they actually still are. But like, they think that they're not influenced by their emotions and they don't have to deal with like the blunt force of them. But man, are they directionless in life. Man, do they feel stress, like, because they don't know what they're feeling and it's confusing. So like, instead, don't build a wall between you and your emotions. And also don't let the emotions overtake you. Build a window. Look through, see your emotions, and use it as data. Don't use it as dogma. Don't use it as dogma. Don't use it as a sacrifice. Like, just say, like, get comfortable with your brain's response to you moving in the direction that you want to move in life. Because here's the thing, like, if I move it, so like, let's say I do something like I want to go to a party. And then I have social anxiety. There's a part of my brain that's going to tell me we're going to be socially anxious. And that part of the brain isn't wrong. Like, when you go to a party, you are opening yourself up to these dangers that your brain is telling you. You could be made fun of. You could be doing this and stuff. And so instead of interpreting that emotion as that is going to happen, instead, understand that is a potential emotional risk, and then use that as data when you're making the decision. It's like, okay, am I willing to go through that emotional pain if it means I can move in this direction in life? Pick a direction you want to move in life. Understand what you're, like, the emotional consequences of moving in that direction. Like, understand that when you move in that direction, it's going to come with stress. It's going to come with pain. And your brain's going to lash out at you. It's going to do all these different things to try and get you to stop. But like, at the end of the day, like, you do have to pick what direction you want to move in. But never let that be an excuse to ignore your emotions. Your emotions are a crucial part of the equation. So like, but like, often it's so paradoxical, but like, what often stops us from getting to happiness is the intolerance of sadness. So like, a lot of people just simply aren't willing to feel a negative emotion so they can end up feeling a positive emotion. Yeah, life is so complicated and nuanced in the end. And when you've spent your entire life being traumatized, that's infinitely more overwhelming than it is for the average person. Because a lot of people have just accepted that. But like when life is like, but when you grow up in a world where life isn't nuanced and you have to form these black and white perceptions of the world in order to survive, life is scary. Like it's like, because now in order to move forward, you have to let go of everything that's brought you this far. Because the part of you has realized that a part of you has realized that now, rather than helping you survive, it's actually starting to do the opposite. It's starting to become maladaptive. It's preventing you, because before you were unhappy, but at least you were safe. Now you're like unhappy, and arguably like it's messing you up more than it's helping you, like from a survival standpoint at this point. And so like now so that's why now it's like, in order to move forward in your life, you have to let go of the entire way your brain used to rationalize everything. I started to be a traumatized person when I was 15, developed OCD due to religious trauma. Now I'm 22, almost 23, trying to get better. Yeah, exactly. Like like trauma can happen at like any age. It's just more common with younger ages, but like, you know, you can get trauma right now, and then that'll affect you for however so long and everything like that. So like when you get traumatized, you start to like your brain like lashes out at the world with like a very simple way to think about things in order to survive, because it's in a fight or flight mode. And so now, in order to move past that, you have to understand, like, okay, the thoughts at which I have built my entire worldview could be incorrect. And the reason that I have to treat this with nuance, and why I have to treat every new piece of information with nuance as well, is because living life in this protective way has not been good for my life thus far. Like, it probably protected me for a bit to like shell up like that, but like it's a part of you recognizes that now it's become maladaptive. Now it's holding you back more than it's helping you. And so that's the important thing to acknowledge, is that it's gonna suck moving forward, and there's gonna be days where like you don't want to deal with this. Like, you just don't want to, like, you're like, you know what, it's not worth moving forward in my life if I have to deal with this amount of pain. And that's fine. Forgive yourself for not moving forward on any specific day. And that sounds weird, because it's like, well, if I forgive myself for not moving forward, then I'll never move forward. What have you been doing up until now? What have you been doing up until now? Up until now, you haven't been forgiving yourself for not moving forward. And how does that turn out? Then it just leads to more self-deprecation, it leads to everything. Accepting failure is the first step towards self-compassion, and one step away from self-sabotage. So paradoxically, try and do what you can to move in the direction away from your trauma and towards the life you want to build, and make decisions day by day. Just do what you can today. And if you can't do enough, then forgive yourself for not being able to do more that day. And then that will hopefully break the cycle of you self-sabotaging, because like what happens when people are hard on themselves for failing? They're just like, oh, you stupid idiot, why'd you fail? And then like they keep failing. They're like, oh, why do I keep failing? It's like, because you're tilted. Like, same as video games. Why do people do good at video games? Because they're calm. Why do they do bad at video games? Because they're tilted. And like, in that same way, quit tilting because you're not making enough progress that you want to be making. Like, whatever happened. You're in the situation you are in now. Nothing's going to change that. Like, nothing's going to change that in this moment. Presently, you are the person you are. So now, instead of thinking about the past, think about like, okay, in this moment, with whatever flaws I may have, what can I do at this very moment? What action can I take? And then just go from there, and then just see how it works out. That's my advice.